is encouraging people to vote by mail. So, I mean, you're trying desperately to hang on to something so you could please Donald Trump and say, oh yeah, you won, Donnie, you won. He didn't win.
I gave you a concrete example of a way that votes could be cast seemingly validly but counted invalidly, and it's a concrete example. It's a very simple question. If ballot boxes are against the Wisconsin Constitution, people who didn't have the authority...
In his heated debate, political commentators Sower and Liz Wheeler clash over some of the most divisive issues in recent American history, including the integrity of the 2020 election and the ideological leanings of the Black Lives Matter movement. Each takes a strong stance on what they perceive as double standards in media coverage, law enforcement, and public perception. Wheeler argues that election procedures were manipulated and points to what she sees as Marxist influences in modern progressive policies. Sower counters with a defense of democratic norms and critiques what he calls exaggerated right-wing narratives. This exchange delves into the ideological chaos that separates America's left and right, revealing the complexities and stakes of today's political landscape. Let's see.
I'm struck by the title of your book, so let's start there if you don't mind. You said that exposing the Marxists behind the attack on America's kids. So do you think Kamala Harris is a Marxist?
I think her policies are in line with Marxist ideology. If you look at an open borders policy, if you look at her support of Black Lives Matter, if you look at her soft on crime policies, if you look at her embrace of redistribution of wealth, a lot of that is in line with a Marxist ideology that takes private property or individual rights away from people and ostensibly gives them to the collective, but really gives them to government.
So Liz, you know Marxism.
Liz Wheeler offers a critical view of the Black Lives Matter movement, arguing that its founders like Patrisse Cullors and Alicia Garza are openly Marxist and have goals that seek to destabilize traditional institutions, including law enforcement and the nuclear family. She cites the group's support for bail funds that assist protesters as evidence of BLM's alignment with Marxist values, claiming this undermines individual rights in favor of collective control. However, Sower rebuts this characterization, contending that labeling BLM as a Marxist organization is an exaggerated attempt to instill fear. He argues that the movement's policies and actions are rooted in social justice and civil rights, not a full-scale Marxist agenda. According to Sower, Wheeler's framing distorts BLM's goals, misleadingly suggesting that the movement aims to abolish private property rather than advocate for systemic reforms to address racial inequality.
Matter rioters were torching buildings, assaulting cops. Kamala Harris posted on her X account, the tweet is actually still live for anybody interested in looking at it, encouraging the American people to go and donate to the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which is a fund to bail out violent criminals who are arrested for the assault of cops or for the arson and the vandalism, the looting, the robbery that they were committing. And that's, I mean, you can't argue that that is a position, a political position that is encouraging of law and order. That would be a political position of chaos, of anarchy. And the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, the founders, I mean, Patrisse Cullors, for example, Alicia Garza, they actually admit they are trained Marxists. So that is not something that I am inferring from the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that they have said that motivates.
Wheeler raises concerns about procedural changes implemented during the 2020 election, specifically focusing on the widespread use of ballot drop boxes in states like Wisconsin. She argues that these measures violated state constitutions and compromised the legitimacy of the election, suggesting that they were manipulated to favor a particular outcome. In response, Sower contends that claims of procedural irregularities were rigorously examined in court, with numerous cases dismissed due to insufficient evidence. He challenges Wheeler's emphasis on these procedural elements, arguing that they serve as a strategy to undermine valid election results. Sower points out that recounts in key states, including Georgia and Arizona, confirmed the legitimacy of the election outcome and reinforced public confidence in its integrity.
This is stupid. I don't think that she's a dumb person. I think that she is an ideologue, and I think she knew exactly what she was doing when she supported not only the Summer of Rage, not only the violent rioters that were torching cities, but this organization themselves.
So rioting and bailing out rioters, terrible. I agree with you, especially the ones that are guilty and trespassing and violence, et cetera. So that's why you were livid about Donald Trump saying that he's going to pardon all the January 6th rioters, right?
Well, listen, I mean, if you go back to what I said after January 6th, I do not support anyone
Wheeler criticizes what she sees as a double standard in how protests are treated, noting that violent acts during Black Lives Matter protests were often described as mostly peaceful, while participants in the January 6th events faced severe consequences. She argues for consistent treatment across protests, suggesting that those involved in the Capitol riot, who believe they were protesting election injustice, should receive leniency similar to that sometimes afforded to BLM protesters. Sower, however, emphasizes that each case has unique contexts and consequences, while condemning any form of violence. He argues that the January 6th incident was a direct assault on democratic processes intended to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. In contrast, he asserts that the BLM protests, despite some instances of violence, were predominantly peaceful demonstrations focused on addressing social justice issues, highlighting the differences in intent and broader impact between the two events.
There's a couple of things. The problem with January 6th is the majority of Americans, this actually includes independents, by the way, and a hefty minority of Democrats, think that the government had agents that were, let's just say, inflaming the tensions around January 6th. And I think that freaks out a lot of people on the left and the right. I think you'd agree, Cenk, that that's the American government has a long history of doing that to people on both the left and the right, and we shouldn't.
Wheeler highlights the legal rulings as evidence of the election's overall integrity, asserting that the repeated rejection of fraud claims demonstrates the strength of the 2020 election process. However, she frequently returns to Wisconsin, noting that the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled against the legality of certain ballot procedures, which she argues supports claims of misconduct. In response, Soa points out that while procedural issues may arise, rulings on specific cases after the election do not invalidate the entire outcome. He stresses the importance of addressing these concerns in real time to prevent them from becoming partisan grievances that undermine public trust in the electoral process.